No, Mikey, no, Mikey, that was so not right.
The biggest F1 news of this very young 2023 year came from FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem. I've asked the FIA team to look into launching an expressions of interest process for prospective new F1 teams for the FIA F1 World Championship. And on Thursday, January 5th, 2023, it became clear why that particular attitude had changed, as Michael Andretti announced that he would be partnering with Cadillac to bring General Motors, an American car manufacturer, into Formula One as an official effort for the first time in history. This came after the FIA and Formula One teams demanded that new teams bring quote-unquote value to the sport of Formula One. And it was clear that the FIA found that value in an additional manufacturer, one that not only had not been in Formula One before, but one with American ties to boot. And that was the trifecta for them. Sulayem said this at the time: "I would welcome the news of Cadillac and Andretti's partnership, and the FIA looks forward to further discussions for the Formula One World Championship expressions of interest process." But the teams themselves are not going silently into the night. And there was a Reuters article by Alan Baldwin that was or has been making quite a bit of noise on the internet today. And in particular, it's because of this quote from an anonymous senior team source talking to Reuters, saying that Andretti's chances of being accepted remain highly unlikely, and that a strong majority of current competitors were very opposed to any expansion of the Formula One grid. Sulayem fired back on Twitter today in a fairly lengthy, at least for Twitter, statement, which reads, "It is surprising that there has been some adverse reaction to the Cadillac and Andretti news. The FIA accepted the entries of smaller, successful organizations in recent years. We should be encouraging prospective F1 entries from global manufacturers like GM and thoroughbred racers like Andretti and others. Interest from teams in growth markets adds diversity and broadens F1's appeal." Now, when we're looking at that statement to Reuters about a strong majority of current competitors that are opposed to any expansion, I've put it into this particular list, which I think will give you an idea of exactly where the teams are standing right now. Now, is this 100% accurate? Probably not, but I think given what we know publicly about the teams and where they stand on Andretti, I think this is about right. Pro Andretti, you've got Alpine, obviously. In fact, Mario Andretti on this very channel confirmed that Renault would be powering whichever Andretti effort would go into Formula One initially. That was in the February of last year, and nothing has changed on that, at least at the moment. The other two, perhaps not so obvious, but they would be Red Bull and Toro Rosso. A bit of a political move, it has to be said, from Michael Andretti over the summer, attempting to get Colton Herta over to the Toro Rosso team to drive. There was a big controversy, if you remember, with super license points. But I think in some ways that willingness to loan out his best driver, I think would have convinced both Toro Rosso and Red Bull that, yeah, this Michael Andretti guy isn't so bad. And the obvious one that would have been a supporter, whether there was an engine deal or driver swaps or whatever you want to talk about, would be McLaren, because, of course, Zach Brown, not only an American, but a friend of Michael Andretti. They've partnered in the past, and Zach Brown, certainly a supporter of Michael Andretti. Now, the anti-Andretti list is, yes, long, or at least longer than the pro-Andretti side, but I would not necessarily say that the teams would say that's a strong, or should be saying that that's a strong majority of teams, but certainly there is some strength there. Mercedes, obviously, I've got it on very, very good authority that Toto Wolff definitely does not want this to happen, so definitely check off Mercedes. A little bit surprising, considering the Italian element to this. Obviously, the Andrettis are Italian Americans, and Mario Andretti was a quite prolific driver for Ferrari in sports cars and Grand Prix racing. But at least as of right now, I would say Ferrari is in the anti-Andretti camp, and that would also include Alfa Romeo Sauber. Haas, Gunther Steiner has been opposed, surprising, maybe not so surprisingly, but considering Haas is an American Formula One team, the lack of American elements on that team, and frankly, some of the things that Steiner has said in the past about American drivers has been surprising and disappointing, and he's kind of kept that line with the Andretti side of things. Aston Martin, the Strolls, why would they want to give up a larger slice of the pie that they already have? And Williams, I think, is really kind of at the mercy of whatever Mercedes is going to do or going to want to do. So that's where the battle stands right now. But I mentioned in my previous video, I think that the FIA, and clearly now with the statement of the FIA president, they want Andretti in Formula One, and they really want General Motors to be in Formula One. And we're definitely going to talk about the implications of that, because I don't think I went as in depth with how big a potential General Motors Formula One entry would be and the implications, especially at this very, very, we'll put it, tumultuous time in American racing is, because there's so many things changing right now globally and in racing that I think the landscape's going to be so different, maybe even in 5 years, not much less 10 or 15, but I think 10 or 15, it may well be unrecognizable based on, or, with thinking about what we know now about how racing is structured and who runs it and what series exist. I think it's totally going to be different in the next couple of years. And I think Formula One is really one of the driving forces behind this change. And the fact that the sleeping giant that is Formula One in the United States has kind of awoken. I think everyone kind of sees the same thing. I think there are some people who still continue to deny the Formula One growth, particularly in the United States, as being a fair weather thing or won't last. But I think Formula One sees, and meaning the Formula One teams see this for what it is. I think Michael Andretti sees this for what it is. I think he's reading the tea leaves very well, in my opinion. And I think the FIA sees what's going on and wants to capitalize on it, because what's happening here is almost a generational shift in terms of what racing series are popular where. But I think they see different, despite the fact that they see different things, I think that each wants to protect what they have. So when we're looking at the teams, you see, if you're a team member or a team owner, team principal, you're looking at Formula One and you're seeing the pie grow massively. And you're seeing your slice of that pie get more and more and more valuable as the months and years go on. The last thing you want to do, and I totally understand guys like Toto Wolff who don't want an extra team or 2 or 3 in Formula One, because why would you? You have an extremely valuable ownership stake in this sport. And if others are coming in, that slice of the pie is going away. Now, it's really important to note that I think that's only beneficial to the team owners and the team principals. For everybody else, I think expanding Formula One, adding more teams is good. Bar none, I think adding teams is good. But for the teams themselves, of course they wouldn't want to give up a slice of a growing pie. Why would you? But that's what Michael Andretti sees too. I think he sees the shift, particularly on the United States side, and particularly on the American open wheel side, of what the general population, and in particular, the younger demographic sees as top-level open wheel racing. I think Michael Andretti is positioning himself to continue to run a top-of-the-line open wheel racing team if, for example, the worst-case scenario happened. Because I think right now, in my estimation, Formula One, and some people will argue it's already there, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but I'm going to make a very large qualification here when we're talking about the dominance in the American open wheel segment when we're talking about Formula One versus IndyCar. And I would say that Formula One, maybe they're neck and neck TV ratings wise with IndyCar. I would say in the mainstream, Formula One definitely has the advantage. I think if you went around on the street and you asked people, do you know who Max Verstappen is versus do you know who Will Power is? I think we know what the answer to that would be. I also think if you showed a picture of a generic Formula One car to people on the street, or a generic open wheel car to people on the street, would they call it an Indy car or would they call it a Formula One car? I would say probably, unless you're where I live, Indianapolis, they're probably going to say that's a picture of a Formula One car. I think that Formula One right now is one Indy 500. And when I say Indy 500, I don't necessarily mean the Indy 500, but I mean a signature marquee, quote unquote, Super Bowl-like event that American audiences can rely on to watch every single year from being the dominant force in the United States. It's not there yet, but I think it could be. They still have to build that event. I don't think it's Vegas, and I don't think it's Miami, and I don't think it's the USGP. I think those are great individual events, but I don't think those events are appointment television for the United States market. I think it is for Formula One fans, but that's only 1 million people or so in the U.S. at the current moment. That's continuing to grow, though. And I think what the FIA sees is that exactly, which is their sleeping giant. The Formula One fans in the U.S. have awoken. They now have an opportunity to take advantage of this market, which they have tried so hard for so many years to take. This country, the United States, has had more attempts at a Grand Prix in more different places than any other country, and it's not even close. They have been trying since the 1960s to establish a presence here, a true presence here in the U.S. And now they have the opportunity to do that. And when you look at a name like Andretti, if you asked people on the street, hey, can you name one race car driver? They're probably going to say Jeff Gordon or Dale Earnhardt Jr. these days. But some of them would say Mario Andretti. The Andretti name is still very much in the U.S. pop culture. So you take that name, you take the fact that they're going to have an American driver, and oh, by the way, they're going to bring GM. And then you start thinking about the balance of power when we're talking about American open wheel racing. What would be aligned at that point is that you'll have Honda, GM, Andretti, and obviously McLaren all involved in Formula One. There will be questions to answer eventually on the IndyCar side. And I think that with General Motors especially, there's a very good reason I think that they came out and said, oh yeah, we're still going to support IMSA and IndyCar. And it's not necessarily just because they're going to support IndyCar and IMSA, at least for the foreseeable future. Because the foreseeable future isn't really set in stone right now when we're talking about this particular program and General Motors' involvement in Formula One. It's not approved yet. Andretti Autosport does not have a Formula One entry, and therefore there is no budget that is being spent on Formula One by General Motors. But the minute that that's approved, things change dramatically, in my opinion. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, even if they don't develop an engine. A Formula One program, a title sponsorship, whatever you want to call it, a branding exercise, as it was put in the Reuters article, that's hundreds of millions of dollars. Are they going to increase their racing budget? Or are they going to shrink it? What looks expendable when you're talking about the top level open wheel racing in the US? These are the sort of things that I'm looking at here. But again, I think the FIA sees this as an opportunity to seize a huge part of the American racing landscape. I think the teams don't want to give up the pie because they think it's going to grow with or without Andretti, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. And I think they also see GM potentially just coming in as another Aston Martin and badging a Renault for its entire time in Formula One. And I agree, it's not really, what value are they actually bringing to Formula One by just slapping a logo on the side of a car? I would completely agree with that criticism. But I also think that the FIA and I certainly see that Andretti is a quality team. We know that. They will bring a quality effort if they're allowed into Formula One. It's not going to be a Marussia. It's not going to be a Caterham. It's going to be a competitive team. So I don't know, man. This is fascinating stuff. I think it's going to be a wild 2023. And if you've made it this far, I think you guys should write it out with me. So subscribe down in the comments. Let me know what you think. And I'm sure you already have. And subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next video.